I have a blank project here. The only thing I've done other than create a new project is I've gone in and I've deleted those unnecessary comments at the beginning of each method here. And what I want to do in this video is demonstrate kind of a generic way of managing the game state of your program. This is something that has to be done in every game program. And the process is basically the same. The details are going to be different from one game to the next, but the overall process is going to be the same. So we're just going to look at some generalities here. So in this game program, I want to have 4 game states. I'm going to declare an enumerated data type. And I misspelled enum. And we're going to have state 1, state 2, state 3, state 4. And I'm going to have a game states variable called game state singular with a lowercase g. And I'm going to need a font. I'm going to put a little bit of text on the screen to just identify which state I'm in. And I'm going to be determining when to switch from one game state to the next by looking at either the keyboard. So I need a keyboard variable. And we're going to look at the transition from one keystroke to the next. So I need to keep track of the previous keyboard. And I'm going to do the same thing with the gamepad. And I'm going to keep track of a background color. And I'm going to have a string that I'm going to use to keep track of the game state. Call it game state title. And let's also do a rectangle for the screen. Okay. And I think that's about everything. If I find out I forgot something, we can come back and add it later on. And so we're going to start off with game state. Actually, before we do that, I always like to initialize the screen. So screen equals new rectangle. And we'll move it in 50 and 50, and we'll make it 700 and 380. So we got an edge of 50 all the way around. And our game state title, our game state is going to be game states dot state 1, and our game state string or game state title. And we need to set a background color. And we're going to start off in red, okay? And now down here, we're just going to set this to, well, we'll leave that. And we're going to need a sprite batch dot begin. And inside here, we're going to do a sprite batch dot draw. And we need a texture, and I forgot the texture, so we'll have to add that in. Screen rectangle, and the color is going to be the background. And then we're going to write a message in the top as well. Draw a string, and we're going to use our font, and the text is going to be the game state title, and just to make it easy, we're going to do vector 2.0, so it'll appear in the upper left hand corner, and then we'll do a white color for that. Okay, and so we should be okay on everything there, except I did forget to declare a texture. So we'll just go up here and texture 2D and screen texture. Okay, And that means I need to bring in 2 bits of content. I need a new font, which I'm just going to call font. And I already had that there. Okay. And I need to add in an existing item. And all I need is just a white rectangle that I can use for my background. And that should be in my SkyDrive, in the content. And let's see, I'm looking for a white. There we go, 30 by 30 will work. Add that. And I'm just going to call that background now. Okay. And we're not going to change the font. So, okay, now we need to load in our load content. We need to load the font. So font equals sprite font. And our screen texture. Okay, and I think we're good to go here. Let's just go ahead and run the program. Should get a red background, and we should get state 1 up here in the upper left hand corner. So far so good. Okay, now what we're going to look at in this program here is how to manage the game state. And your update program will typically be divided up into 2 or 3 parts. Let's say 3 parts. Okay. My screen recording software is making everything lag a little bit here. But the first part is always going to be to update the game state. Okay. And then after, so we'll have some code for that. And then a little bit further down, we will update the sprites. Okay, just move everything around that needs to be moved around on the screen. And then the last thing we're going to do every time is, after you move everything, then you have to see what the consequences are of those movements. And so basically we're probably going to be doing something like check for collisions. Okay, so in general, that's kind of what the 3 basic parts of our program are going to be. And this first part up here is going to be pretty much the same every time. Okay, and it's going to kind of look like this. If game state is state 1, then I want to do some stuff. Okay, I want to check to see if it's time to move out of state 1 and into state 2. Okay. We'll also have if game state, darn it, state 2, then we'll have some tests in here to see if it's time to move on to state 3. And we'll have if game state 3, then we'll have some tests in here to see if it's time to move on to state 4. Okay, and we'll do these one at a time. So in general, you're just going to have, if you're in state 1, do this. Check to see if it's time to go on to state 2. And if you're in state 2, check to see if it's going to state 3, and so on. So it's pretty straightforward. It's going to be pretty much the same in every single game. The difference is in what determines when you move from one state to the next. And since we're not really playing a game here, the only thing I can really do to move from one game state to the next is either press a key on the keyboard or press a button on the gamepad. So I'm going to assume that I can move to the next state either by pressing the start button on the gamepad or by pressing the enter key on the keyboard. So I need an if statement here. And if pad1.buttons.start is button state.pressed on this tick, and whoops, don't close off the if condition there, and previous pad1 buttons start, if it was released on the previous one, then it just happened, and that means I want to move on to state 2. And similar code for the keyboard. If keys.enter is down and the previous time I checked the keyboard, the enter key was up, then it's just happened on this tick of the clock, and I want to go to Gamestate. I did it again. That wrong one always comes up there. Go to state 2. Okay? Now, so this will get me into state 2. Now, since there's nothing really going on in the rest of the program here, what you also need to do when you move into a new state is you have to do any initialization for that state. Okay, so the initialization that needs to be done for state 2 is this. I need to set my background equal to, and we're going to go from red to green. And the other thing is my game state title is going to be set to state 2. Okay, now the way I've got this set up right now, it's not going to work. As a matter of fact, I'll show you. You can probably figure out why it's not going to work. Okay, immediately I come up in state 2, and I have green for background. Both of those things are what should happen in state 2. And here's the reason. If I'm in state 1, which I am on the very first tick of the clock, this is false, so I don't go to state 2. This is false, so I don't go to state 2. But I'm doing this. So I'm moving to state 2 regardless. So what I need to do is one of two things. I either need to take these two instructions here and make sure that they only get executed when one of these conditions is true. Okay, so put them inside of the if. Like that. Now these will only happen if I'm in state 1 and I've either pushed the start button or I've pushed the enter key. So let's run that. And it should come up in state 1 and I should be red. Okay, and now I'm going to push the start button right now. And okay, nothing happened when I push the start button. Why is that? Let's go back and look. I forgot two real important things. I'm never reading the gamepad or the keyboard. And in addition to that, gamepad.getState and keyboard okay, so I got to read them first, and then at the end, the last thing before you do this base.update should be to save them. Previous keyboard equals KBD, and previous pad1 equals pad1. Okay, and now if I run it, it should work. Should come up in red, state 1, and I'm going to push the start button now, and I go to state 2. And let's stop the program, and so now it's working. Now, there's one thing I don't like about the way I've written this code, and that is I've got all of this code here is duplicated twice. Now it's only 2 instructions, but if I need to make any changes, I'm going to have to, if I decide I'm going to make the state 2, purple instead of green, I've got to remember to change it here and change it here, and I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just undo a bunch of stuff here and get back to where we were before. Whoops, I don't want to undo that stuff. I'm going to have to go back and delete stuff. Okay. So I'm going to have to delete this stuff and delete this stuff. Okay, it's okay to leave the curly brackets in here, it doesn't really matter, although they're kind of redundant right now because there's only one thing in there, one statement. So if I want that only to happen if I go to state 2, I can put another if statement here that says if game state equals state 2, then, okay, so if this takes me to state 2 or this takes me to state 2, then I'll be in state 2 when I get down here, and only if I'm in state 2 will I do these things. So now it works. It'll work just like it did a minute ago, except I've only got this code in here once instead of twice. So I like that a little bit better. So let's run it, and I should be able to push the start button. Actually, this time I'll hit the enter key instead, and it takes me to state 2. Okay. So if I can do that, I can easily take care of the transition from state 1 from state 2 to state 3. So let's go down here. I'm going to copy and paste. Now be careful when you copy and paste because it can save you a lot of time, but if you don't remember to change everything, then you're going to have some bugs in your program. Okay, and I can't just change all the 2's to 3's. I've also got to remember what color I'm going to here. And I'm going to go to blue when I go to state 3. And then if I go down here and paste the code in again, this is going to take me from state 3 to state 4. And in state 4 we're going to do yellow. And change that to state 4. Okay, and now, okay, so if I'm in state 1, this is what I want to do. If I'm in state 2, this is what I want to do. If I'm in state 3, this is what I want to do. So let's go try to run the program now, and you may have guessed that it's not going to do what we want it to do yet. I'm going to click on the start button, and let's push the start button on my gamepad. And I went from state 1 all the way to state 4. Okay, I was supposed to go to state 2, and so what happened here? Well, what happened is I was in state 1. I pushed the button, went to state 2, and then I reached this point right here, and this is another if statement, so it's going to get executed right after this one does, and it says, are you in state 2? Well, yeah, I'm in state 2 because I just switched to it right here. And so I do all the stuff for state 2, and then which includes switching to state 3 because the key is, or the button on the gamepad is still pressed, and it was released on the last tick. So I go to state 3 right away, and then I check this for state 3, and this stuff is still true, so I go to state 4. So I just flip right through all the states just on one tick of the clock, which is not what I want to do. Okay, so how do you avoid that? There's 2 ways to avoid it. I'm going to show you one of the ways. One is if you're in state 1 on this tick of the clock, we'll assume that you can only be in one game state at a time, which is true. And so if I'm in state 1, I don't want to do check for state 2 or check for state 3. So what I need to do is I need to make these mutually exclusive. And the way you do that is you just make all of this stuff down here, you make it the else branch of the first if. And if I just bring this up here, this is the way it's frequently written. So if this is true, do this stuff. And if it's not true, then do this if. Okay, and then this if this if is not true, we need an else for it, and that else would go down here. And again, I'm going to bring the stuff from the next line up. And now what I've got is, this is called a case structure. Case structure is basically where you have one path through a bunch of if statements. So either game state is going to be equal to 1, and I'm going to do this stuff, and skip everything below this, because this is the else part of the first if. And the else part of the first if is another if with another else, and that else has another if in it. So if I'm in state 1, I will do this stuff, and if I'm not, I will do everything from here on down. Okay, so let's say I'm in state 1, I do this, I skip it all. skip everything else. Let's say I'm not in state 1. Well, then I take this else and I'm in state 2. And if I'm in state 2, then I will do this stuff. And the else that goes along with this if up here, it's too bad that it doesn't automatically highlight it for you to show you what matches. But the if and else that match up are these two. So if this is false, then, well, if it's true, I will do this and I'll skip over everything that's in the else, which is the last if here. And if this is false, then I will take the else branch, which is this if. Oh shoot, I didn't mean to do that. Let's do Control Z. And so I will do this if, and so it'll take exactly one path through these nested ifs. Okay, and that will fix it. Now if I run the program, I start off in state 1, and I press the start button and I go to state 2. And I'm going to press the start button again now, and I go to state 3, and I'm going to press start button again now, and I go to state 4. And I can press it all I want to after that, and nothing's going to happen because there is nothing beyond state 4. But that gets my game state transitions to work for me. So the basic algorithm is you use nested ifs. If game state 1, do this. Else if game state 2, do this. Else if game state 3, do this. And so on for as many game states as you need. Okay, and we'll stop there, and in the next video we're going to take a look at a way to simplify some of this code here.